Hello and welcome to Türkiye Talks. Today we are going to talk about Turkey's new Middle East policy or new reapproachment of Turkish diplomats, Turkish president to some countries like Egypt, and also there are talks of reapproachment with Syria. Today I am joined by Kadir Üstün from Washington and Professor Vehbi Baysan from İbn Haldun University. Thank you very much for joining the show, Vehbi Hocam and Kadir. Let's start with the famous photo where, in Qatar World Cup premiere, many leaders came together, and in that meeting, Turkish president approached to Egyptian president, and they shook hands after 9 years of hard, actually difficult relations. Professor, maybe what is your opinion about that? Is this, to what extent Turkey and Egypt can develop their relations after years of quarrels, especially from Turkish side? Turkey criticized Egypt because of the military coup and the democracy issues and etc. What extent do you think these relations can go further?
Well, Bora, thank you first of all for inviting me to this really the show with the distinguished guests. But what I'd like to say here is that it seems Qatar presented a very valuable opportunity for leaders to meet. We used to hear, of course, could be rumors, could be facts, but we know for a fact that actually behind closed doors, Turkey and Egypt both were seeking a viable exit for these crises. So no doubt about that. So it seems now that both leaders meeting in Doha and shaking hands, but also giving it to media, changed the rules of the game. Now, let's go back a little bit why the bilateral relations went so badly damaged. In my view, it has a lot of reasons we can count, but I think it's fair to say that Turkey suffered enormously from the military coups in the past. Let's remember when we're talking about Turkey's democratization in 1950s, seems some army generals sees this too much. In 1960, we had a military coup, and of course, a lot of parties shut down and really nasty things happened. Let's remember also a prime minister been hanged in this country. And again, the political parties went back. They didn't go underground. That's very important. Went back again, in a free society. But this time in 1971, we had another military coup. But Turkish parties seems quote-unquote hard learners. They went back again in the democratic platform. They united under different names. But again, as you would probably remember, in 1980, we had another military coup. So suffering this much, these are physical interferences in Turkey. But also, let's remember 28 February, also that was kind of a military coup, postmodern military coup, because they asked the democratically elected government to step down. So all these back in our mind, Turkey criticizing a military coup in Egypt was a fair approach. So that's my personal opinion, at least standing against it. But that also further proved to Turkish society that my military coup is better than yours. So it seems West have different approach to military coups. So there are good ones and bad ones. So anyhow, this is, I think, the summary of it. But of course, we need to say Turkey supported Muslim Brotherhood and sees it as a democratically elected government there. So anyhow, all these things happen, and now Turkey, at least for the last couple of years, doing its best to signal to our brothers in Egypt that let's put all this behind us and let's move on, because probably it's very difficult to think about the Middle East or the future of the Middle East without Turkey and Egypt acting for it, for the peace and prosperity. But having a kind of crisis in the bilateral relations with Egypt, that made things very difficult because Turkey had a lot to offer. Kind of from business to construction to the future of Middle East, let's call it. And Egypt has too. So cooperating, this, equally large countries, probably can say 85 million in each country, is actually a good thing. So that's why first came as a surprise. It seems President Erdogan likes to surprise us. This was not announced before that he was going to shake hands or even meet with Mr. Sisi. We didn't know anything about it, at least like public at large. But then suddenly we had this photo. But of course, immediate reactions were like, why now? What happened? What changed? But of course, nothing is eternal, especially in international and bilateral relations. Like you can have, bad relations in the past, and now you can move on for a better future.
Well, very, clear explanation why Turkey was so angry with the coup. Thank you very much for that. But Kadir, I want to ask you about the timing of this handshake. Because, in Turkey, some people criticized the president because he used very harsh words. He highlighted when people were being killed in the squares of Cairo and Alexandria and other cities, when the members of the leading party, the ruling party, were imprisoned. So he kept criticizing, especially in the summer of 2013 and later 14. So he was very critical about the Egyptian government, especially the president. So because he did that, when he approached and he implemented this new policy with the Egyptian president, it has a domestic cost. So while Turkey is going to an elections, the president took this decision, and actually, despite the domestic cost, he preferred to take the risk. Because why do you think so? What is the because part of it? Despite the cost, he took this decision. I think it's a very brave decision to shake hands with a man you criticize so harshly. What is your opinion on that?
Well, first, the broader context is Turkey has been normalizing with a number of countries in the Middle East. Started with UAE, Saudi, and then Egypt, Israel. First of all, we have to think of it in terms of the broader context, broader developments that have been happening over a year and a half, even more. Emerging out of the pandemic, I think there are many challenges. Then there's Ukraine, there's economy, the supply chain disruptions, etc. All these challenges require a lot more cooperation than opposition. Turkey has been reaching out to Iran, Russia, to keep things under control in Syria. With Russia, there's the Ukraine angle. So all these neighbors or regional neighbors of Turkey, Turkish president has been meeting with them and trying to reach out to them, despite the history, like you mentioned. And when Turkey has used very harsh language in the past against these leaders, especially Sisi, the context was the context of immediate danger to a number of people inside Egypt who were trying to demonstrate, who wanted a change in the system. And Turkey was one of the most vocal countries. And let's remember, United States would not even call it a coup, because that would have meant that the U.S. would have to cut its military support to Egypt, which was kind of unimaginable, given the relationship with Israel, etc. So that was, some people even accused Washington of tacit approval of the coup. So in that context, when Turkey was using, very harsh language and opposing the human rights violations and abuses inside the country, and that was a brave decision at the time, and many, people, human rights advocates, actually applauded Turkey. And Turkey also hosted a number of dissidents on Turkish soil for a number of years. But Sisi has actually proved that, he's going to be around for a while. So this is the leader of the country who has been normalizing with other countries in the region, who has gotten the support of the regional countries, and who has also participated in the Eastern Mediterranean discussions. After Turkey's agreement with Libya, there was an attempt at pushing Turkey out of the Eastern Mediterranean through an alliance of, Israel, Egypt, Greece, and Cyprus. So when we look at it, Turkey has been able to kind of break that almost anti-Turkish, let's say, alliance. It was of course centered around this energy issue, energy interests, but Turkey took it to mean an anti-Turkey alliance. But by normalizing with Israel, now trying to normalize with Egypt, Turkey has broken that alliance in many ways. So there's the broader context of Turkey, President Erdogan reaching out to regional countries to normalize, and then most immediately the Eastern Mediterranean issues and the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, right? The Turkey has in many ways, was instrumental. Well, let me put it this way: Turkey, when they called out what happened in Istanbul against Jamal Khashoggi, that was a big blow to MBS, Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, and for his political future. President Erdogan made up with him as well. He has been trying to improve bilateral relations. Like Professor Baysan mentioned, as he said, you cannot stay in the same position for a long time. But at the same time, we have to see this in context so that we understand that Turkish interests are being served by these outreaches. So in that, when Turkey is normalizing with Israel, they're not abandoning Palestinians. When Turkey is normalizing with Sisi, they're not abandoning Muslim Brotherhood. And this is a new policy of engagement and rapprochement, as you said, but not necessarily at the expense of people that Turkey has supported in the past. So I think that's kind of the context that we need to understand, and understand Turkey's recent outreach to regional countries.
What can be the consequences? Kadir mentioned a little bit about breaking the anti-Turkey alliance. Greek Cypriots, Greece, Egypt, plus Israel. They were coming together. They signed agreements. They gave photos to the international media. But with this new policy, with rebuilding the relations with Egypt, Israel, and others, what kind of impact do you think it will have When we look at the Libya issue, the Eastern Mediterranean, also we know that Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries supported and supports Egypt because it's a very important outlet for them to the Mediterranean. Also, we can add the Syria administration to the equation because the president also said there is possibility that at some point he can meet with the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. What can you tell us about this?
To better explain this question, I think we should look into first and foremost why none of the Arab leadership in the Middle East did not actually oppose or even criticize or allowed any type of criticism towards the military coup took place in Egypt. I think deep inside, one of the major factors is that the fear of political Islam dominating the politics in the Middle East. From that perspective, successful winning elections in Egypt, in a sense, probably we can say that the Muslim Brotherhood became victim of their own success, and therefore there wasn't like widespread condemnation or any sort of that, despite all this, say, unfortunate outcomes of an authoritarian regime. So similarly, when we look Turkey's involvement in Libya and Egypt's reaction towards that, because a character emerged after Libya went into a bloody civil war, turmoil, and Turkey tried to take part in it too, but without taking sides, it wasn't possible in Libya. As, again, I would like to link it with Turkey's policy in the Middle East, in the Arab world, right after or in fact, during the Arab Spring, probably gives us some hints why Turkey-Syria relations deteriorated. What happened in the Arab Spring was a popular uprising towards tyrants, towards authoritarian regimes, because the young generation were no longer afraid of the tactics these regimes used to scare their parents. So they went in the streets. It was absolutely risky. Many of them, in thousands, lost their lives, but yet they were determined to change the basically these authoritarian regimes. In many parts, they actualized this, but in the Syrian case, it turned into a bloody civil war. So Turkey's position became apparent that they had to stick with the side. Either you would be with the regime that previously you established, even personally, very nice relations, which was translated into the good relations between the two countries. But now, in that civil war, Turkey had to make the tough decision. Either you go and support the regime, cooperate with the regime, that daily killing hundreds and thousands of people, or choose a side that, stand along with the rebels, those who wanted to have a better life, more dignified life. So that was Turkey's policy. And then, of course, an very unexpected actor emerged, which dominated the politics in the Middle East, ISIS, namely ISIS. Probably the most dangerous organization our contemporary times ever seen. Let's remember that for a long months, probably more than 2-3 years, they occupied two countries, namely Syria and Iraq, like two legitimate countries recognized by the UN. An organization like ISIS occupied their territory. So this is like unheard of, unprecedented. So that played, I think, a significant role in Turkey's policies and politics within the Syrian has a Syrian strategic position. That further, I think, escalated the tension between Turkey and rest of the Arab countries, despite that many Arab countries were not really very happy what the Syrian regime was doing. Let's remember that they were ousted from the Arab League, and just recently they were called back. So they were in a way following the similar policy like Turkey did, but that did not help much, of course, maintaining the relationship with the Syrians, because after especially Russian forces physically involved in the war, by the way, for the first time in the Middle East, supporting the regime, which in a sense they rescued them.
Kadir, maybe we can here talk about balance of power in the region. I would like to remind our viewers that this change of foreign policies of the Middle Eastern countries started with Saudi Arabia removing the blockade on Qatar. They were invited to Gulf Cooperation Council, so there was a rapprochement with Qataris. Then we have seen other steps taken by other nations. UAE and some Gulf countries signed Abraham Accords with Israel. Turkey and Israel came together. So we have seen lots of developments, also including some Western countries as well. I mean, the United States rapprochement to Saudis. So we have seen a lot of changes. Do you think that this is a sign of recognizing countries, their power, and respecting that? I mean, same for Turkey. You know, Turkey did operations in Syria, Libya, Karabakh. So Turkey actually exposed its power. So Sisi, as you both mentioned, remained in power. He was able to hold on to power. So do you think can we say that this is recognition of the new situation in the Middle East by everyone?
Yes, I would think so. And we discussed this in previous episodes as well. When I think pandemic really, pushed everyone to rethink everything from, infrastructures, manufacturing infrastructure to, politics in the region. And then many countries understood, this basically change of power in Washington, also from Trump to Biden, was was an important turning point as well, because there was a very, very Gulf-oriented, Israel-focused U.S. Middle East policy, and with the Biden administration, that has changed significantly. And then you have invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which pushed energy prices, which really strained the supply chains around the world. Everybody had to rethink what they were doing, both in terms of, their economic policies. They had to roll out economic rescue packages, and then they had to address supply chain issues. They had to address how to deal with pandemic, and their relationship with the United States, Russia, China have been deeply impacted by these developments. And now, you mentioned President Biden going to Saudi Arabia, having called, MBS ruthless, pariah country or pariah leadership. That was very striking. Of course, it received a lot of criticism in the United States, but the basic thing was, the oil prices are so high in the international markets, and it's impacting inflation around the world. It's impacting the consumers in the United States, which were going to influence the midterm results. And Biden's numbers kept going down. Remember, last summer, he had something like 32% approval rating, which has increased since then. So, what happens outside the country doesn't remain outside the country. We are living in a very interconnected world, and all these developments have a bearing on domestic policies of countries. And I think we saw with OPEC plus their power in influencing the prices and oil prices in the international markets. So you do have to recognize that Saudi Arabia is not a pariah country, although what they've done in Istanbul is abhorrent. But countries, given the current circumstances, feel like they need to move on, and that's what happened with Biden, and that's what's happening with Erdogan in many ways. And Egypt, you can't. I mean, in my opinion, in the Middle East, there's Egypt, there's Turkey, there's Iran, and there's Saudi Arabia. These are four formidable powers, and that their policies impact what happens in the region. Of course, Israel as well, right? So Turkey, has reached out to Saudi Arabia. Because of the like you said, they had a problem with Qatar, and Turkey helped Qatar. The current leadership remained in power largely in thanks to Turkey, actually. But that meant sort of relations soured with Saudi Arabia, with Khashoggi as well. So Turkey felt the need to address that and reached out to Saudi Arabia. We should also mention, from the very beginning, Turkey did not target Saudi Arabia as a whole. Turkey asked for accountability, and Turkey asked Saudi Arabia to come to terms with this. You can't do this in a country like Turkey. So, long story short, I think when the superpower like the United States decides to pull out of the region, stay away from, micromanaging a lot of the relationships, the regional powers feel like they need to talk to each other. And then you have to sort of give the other side, their due, or you have to recognize their power, their influence, where they're most influential at. So that's what's happening. And we might find that, this might be actually healthier. In my opinion, it's going to be healthier for the region if, intra-regional dialogue is strengthened, because, a lot of these leaders used to be sort of basically receivers of U.S. policy, and would basically play a role in that larger policy. But today, I think more indigenous, more intra-regional policies are emerging. They may not be to the liking of everyone, but especially these four major powers talking to each other, engaging each other in the long run will be beneficial for the stability of the region, I think.
Professor, let's talk a little bit about Turkish-Syrian relations. If a Turkish president meets with his Syrian counterpart, I think there are a few issues. For example, for Turkey, it's the PKK, YPG, and their operations from Syrian territory to against Turkey. Second, the refugee issues. They are the most important problems that Turkey wants to solve. From Syrian point of view, they are concerned about handling the opposition, maybe a Syrian unity government or a constitutional process is going on. So this is the political future of Syria is at stake. Secondly, 1/3 of the country is under occupation of the US and the YPG. So do you think if the two leaders meet, will there be a solution to these problems, or this will be just a beginning of a long process? What is your opinion about that?
Well, these are prolonged and chronicle problems. We cannot really expect an immediate solution that would satisfy everyone. But let's remind ourselves the map of crisis. Probably the most important one is that the Syrian regime does not recognize the opposition. They still call them a terrorist, and there is no one that we can sit around the table. This was a long-term policy. They deny any type of meeting, and then they decided to meet with some groups that they choose, but then later came out that these were all like made it up by themselves, so not the real opposition. For a fact that you cannot establish a stable Syria and also peace in that country without involving the opposition. So that's one part. But then the question comes out. It's not an easy thing, because which opposition we're talking about? Probably because now international community mainly concerned about the ISIS and its still viable threat region, not only in Syria but also in Iraq. But we are kind of tend to forget what's going on in Idlib. Idlib is still not under regime control, so far as I know. There were some agreements and checkpoints, etc., but there are like some armed groups. They're saying it's in thousands, and they're determined to fight back because they have nowhere else to go. I mean, so what's going to happen to these people? And it comes to the refugee issues. Probably almost 50% of the population already, either, as we say in Arabic, لاجئون. These are the ones that left the country. But we also have displaced people within Syria. I mean, we know the numbers of people approximately living in Turkey, Lebanon, and Egypt. In Jordan, and many of them in these makeshift camps and horrible conditions in winter, especially. But no one is talking about the thousands, hundreds and thousands of people displaced within Syria, and how much aid actually reaches them, and how much of them the children in education, etc. But when it comes to Turkey's position, it is far more concerning, in my view, because somehow this issue of northeastern part of Syria is very much attached or aligned with, I think, not so true vocabulary. And that's why international community find it very difficult to be convinced and pay attention to the issue, because that is the Kurdish, you see. So like the image there is Turkey is like being a naughty boy, quote unquote, that is annoyed of Kurds living there. But that's not true. The reality is that in the pretext of fight against ISIS, here I'm saying it is very legitimate and should be done. Turkey is not refusing that. But under this pretext, hundreds and thousands of people, I don't know the exact number, but somewhere between 25,000 to 65,000 men in the northeastern part of Syria, armed, trained, financed, and given the field experience in the fight against ISIS. Now look, Ora, this is a legitimate concern of any state in this planet, that if you have thousands of men armed, trained and financed, And especially, it is the global US policy that they never offer solution. One day, they're going to say that we're finished, we're done with ISIS, and they will just take their bags, take their jackets, rather, and leave the region, and leave behind all these guns and weapons and trained men. They don't offer a solution for that. I mean, even if you put them in with the Eskimos will be concerned, because these guns will turn against Kurds to Kurds, Kurds to Arabs, Arabs to Turks, you name it. I mean, we already experienced that. This is precisely what happened in Libya. Just remember that after the popular uprising, and after especially killing of Gaddafi, they were trying to find solution. And then France, I clearly remember, they came up and said, oh, excuse me, we just distributed so many guns there, but we never informed the international community. And these guns still troubling in the region, but not only in Libya, but also went to Mauritania, went to Tuaregs, and when they toppled the government in Niger, the army didn't have that quality weapons. So these are dangerous things to just distribute them around and then take no responsibility and just go away. Overall, what I'm trying to say is that Turkey is not fighting against Kurds. If you notice that all my classification, I did not mention any ethnic background. Even if these are Eskimos, these are still, a clear and present danger to any state on this planet.
Well, yes. Bora, maybe I will have a question for you. These, especially Syria, but also Egypt, these countries, Turkey, have had serious issues with their current leaders in the past, and now President Erdogan is talking about outreach, and he's met with Sisi, and they gave out that photo as well. What is the reaction in Turkey, both the media and the opposition parties? Because the main opposition party in Turkey for a long time talked about meeting. They sent actually some MPs in the past, especially at the earlier part of the conflict, to meet with Assad or Assad's people. So how do they talk about this all that much inside the country? This handshake with Sisi, etc. Because they've advocated for these policies, and now Erdogan is actually has been for a long time reaching out anyway. And this latest picture, and then in that context, the potential to meet with Assad. How is that being kind of discussed inside the country in the media?
The photo was actually was top on the agenda for a couple of days because it works in different ways for the government side and for the opposition side. Opposition used this as an argument of a failure for the Turkish government, and they tried to increase the cost, domestic cost of this photo, saying that Turkey made a mistake, and now this photo shows that Turkey is stepping back. So they wanted to utilize this for domestic consumption. But from the government side, and especially not only the government side, but the analysts, they were actually receiving this photo in a more positive way. We have just talked about it. Of course, there is a domestic cost for the president, but despite this, he accepted to meet with the Egyptian president, and he didn't hesitate to share this photo with the public, because I think he believes that the political gains in international arena will be much more important than the cost of the domestic consumption. So he went for that, and he also revealed a self-confidence to the Turkish public when it is necessary. He showed that he's ready to take tough decisions. So the reaction was mixed from both sides, but I think in general this was received well in Turkey, because when you fix your relations, amend your relations with countries like Egypt or Syria, it will in a way contribute to Turkey's political stand. Also, Egypt was a partner, a trade partner, so there are opportunities, and I think everybody made this their point. And now, as we have discussed, we entered a new era in the Middle East, so this was a recognition of that. The Syria is much more complicated because we have according to official numbers, I think 3.5 million Syrian refugees plus some others. So people talk about 5 million, 6, we don't know. But the official numbers is 3.5 as far as I know. So we have that much of Syrian refugees, plus the terror groups are operating in northern Syria. Turkey is trying to control that corridor. So, and many things has been said against the Syrian regime and the president. They are still there, but the thing is, I think for both sides, it is time to talk about future. It's time to find solutions. I don't think there will be peace between Syria and Turkey in the coming years, but probably there will be, a kind of cold peace. And I think both sides are looking for that. For both sides, there is a political cost, especially in domestic politics. But I think, again, here, President Erdogan, again, reveals his self-confidence, and he believes that he can convince Turkish society about the steps that he's planning to take. Because without talking to the Syrian regime, it is difficult for Turkey to find solution to the refugee problem, the terror issue, and etc. Syrian governments, not today, but in the past, Hafez Assad and previous governments, they were never friendly to Turkey. We know that the PKK leader Öcalan was hosted. The Syria harbored the organization in 1980s and 90s until there was an ultimatum from Turkish Land Force commander when he made the statement in 1998. So there were problems all the time. There will be problems, but I think in conflict resolution, you talk to your enemy. You talk to your. It's very normal. So I think Turkish president is self-confident to convince Turkish society. So this was the general reaction from Turkey. So if you have your opinion about that, Turkey-Syria rapprochement, so we can finish with that if you like.
We discussed it many times. I think very briefly, Turkish, there are limited things that you can talk to Assad and get some results. The big players are still there, Russia, Iran, and others. And I think there is a recognition of that on the Turkish side. But especially with regard to the northwestern part of Syria, where PKK's Syrian branch is active, and what they're doing inside Turkey now, we know, the recent bombing was related to that region. So there are limited things that Assad can deliver, but this might be one of those things that, if they also squeeze PKK somehow, that might be to Turkey's, advantage, and that might be the context. But I agree with both of you. Broader, settlement of the Syrian conflict, that's gonna take a lot more heavy, lifting in terms of diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Vehbi Baysan. Thank you very much for joining us. Kadir Üstün from Washington, thank you. So this is the end of today's Türkiye Talks. Hope to see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.